The blood on her dress was still fresh when Harper Grayson stepped off the stagecoach in Abiquiu, New Mexico Territory, in the summer of 1878, her hands shaking as she clutched her carpetbag and tried not to think about the man she had just watched die during a robbery attempt 50 miles back. She had never seen violence like that before. The way the bandits had simply shot the guard without hesitation, how his life had ended in seconds while she pressed herself against the floor of the coach, praying they would not notice her. The other passengers had screamed, but Harper had gone silent, frozen in terror as rough hands had rifled through belongings and taken what little money the travelers possessed. When it was over and the bandits rode off whooping into the desert, Harper had looked at the guard's empty eyes and felt something inside her harden. This was the West. This was what she had come to, leaving behind Philadelphia and everything civilized she had ever known. Her aunt had warned her that men out here were different, that they were hard and cruel and lived by the gun. Harper had thought herself brave for making the journey to teach at the small school that desperately needed an educated woman. Now she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The town of Abiquiu stretched before her in the afternoon heat, adobe buildings baking under an unforgiving sun. Dust devils swirled in the unpaved streets. A few people moved between buildings, but most seemed to be sheltering from the heat. Harper could not blame them. The air felt like it was baking the moisture from her skin. "Miss Grayson," a woman's voice called out, and Harper turned to see a sturdy woman in her 50s approaching, wearing a practical cotton dress and a bonnet that had seen better days. "I am Martha Reeves, the minister's wife. We have been expecting you." Harper managed a weak smile. "Yes, I am Harper Grayson. I apologize for my appearance. There was an incident on the road." Martha's eyes went to the bloodstains on Harper's traveling dress and her expression grew grim. "The Dalton gang. I do not know their names. They shot the guard. Lord have mercy. Come, child. Let us get you settled. You can tell the sheriff what happened after you have had a chance to clean up and rest." Harper followed Martha through the dusty streets, her eyes taking in everything with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. She saw rough-looking men outside a saloon, their clothes dusty and their gun belts prominent on their hips. Cowboys, she assumed, the kind of men who lived by violence and drink. One of them tipped his hat at her as she passed, but his smile seemed predatory rather than friendly. She quickly looked away. The schoolhouse was a simple adobe building with a bell tower. Attached to it was a smaller structure that would serve as Harper's living quarters. It was sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small stove, and a table with 2 chairs. A single window looked out toward the mountains in the distance. "It is not much," Martha said apologetically, "but it is yours. We are so grateful you agreed to come. The children need proper education, and we have not had a teacher in over a year." "It will do fine," Harper said, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. Everything felt unreal after the violence she had witnessed. "When do classes begin?" "Next week. That should give you time to settle in and prepare. I will bring you some supper later. For now, rest." "You have had a terrible shock." After Martha left, Harper sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself cry. Silent tears streamed down her face as the reality of what she had witnessed crashed over her. A man had died. She had seen death. And those bandits had looked at her with such cold indifference that she knew her life had meant nothing to them. They could have killed her as easily as they had killed the guard. Was this what the West was? Was every man here so hardened by violence that human life held no value? Her aunt had told her that cowboys were rough and heartless, that they thought only of money and drink, and had no use for gentle things like books or poetry or art. Harper had defended them, saying that surely men everywhere had the capacity for kindness. Now she wondered if she had been naive. She washed the blood from her hands and changed into a clean dress. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a pale face with wide brown eyes, her dark hair falling loose from its pins. She looked young and frightened. She was 22 years old, had graduated from a teacher's college with honors, and had thought herself ready for adventure. Instead, she felt like a child who had wandered into a nightmare. That evening, Martha brought her a simple meal of beans and cornbread, along with the sheriff, a weathered man named Tom Bradley who took her statement about the robbery. He listened gravely, writing things down in a small notebook. "The Dalton gang has been hitting coaches all through this territory," he said. "We have been trying to catch them for months, but they know the land too well. I am sorry you had to experience that, Miss Grayson. It is not always like this." "But it is often like this," Harper said quietly. "Is it not?" The sheriff did not answer immediately. Finally, he sighed. "The West is still wild, madam, but there are good people here too. Do not judge us all by the worst of us." After he left, Harper ate her meal without tasting it and lay down on the narrow bed. She could hear sounds from the town drifting through her window. Laughter from the saloon, horses moving in the street, someone singing in Spanish. It was all so foreign, so different from the orderly streets of Philadelphia, where gas lamps lit the evenings and policemen walked regular beats. She did not expect to sleep, but exhaustion pulled her under eventually. She dreamed of the dead guard's eyes and woke before dawn, gasping. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Harper organized the schoolroom, which had been left in disarray by the previous teacher's hasty departure. She found slates and primers, maps that were outdated but serviceable, and a few precious books that she treated like treasures. She made lists of what supplies she would need and went into the town's general store to make purchases. The storekeeper, Mr. Chen, a Chinese immigrant who spoke perfect English with only the slightest accent, was kind and helpful. "Miss Grayson, the children will be lucky to have you," he said as he tallied her purchases. "My daughter Sarah will be one of your students. She is very excited." "How old is Sarah?" Harper asked. 10 years old. She is bright and eager to learn. Her mother would have been so proud." A shadow crossed his face. "My wife passed 2 years ago." "I am sorry for your loss," Harper said softly. "Thank you. Life is hard here, but we make our way." "You will find that people in Abiquiu take care of each other, despite what you may think after your journey here." Harper wanted to believe him, but she had seen little evidence of gentleness so far. The cowboys who drifted in and out of town seemed crude and rough, their language coarse, their manners non-existent. They tracked mud into the store and spoke loudly, laughing at jokes that seemed to revolve around violence or women. Harper kept her distance and her eyes down. On Sunday, she attended church services in a small chapel where Martha's husband preached about mercy and redemption. The congregation was a mix of ranchers, townspeople, and Hispanic families who had lived in the area for generations. Harper sat in the back and observed, trying to get a sense of this community she had joined. After the service, several families introduced themselves and their children, who would be her students. The children seemed shy but curious, peeking at her from behind their mothers' skirts or staring with open interest. Harper counted about 15 students of various ages, from 6 to 14 years old. "You will have your hands full," said a woman named Elena Martinez, who had 3 children enrolled. "But we are grateful. Education is the path to a better life for our children." Harper was touched by the sincerity in the woman's voice. Perhaps there was hope here after all, she thought. Perhaps not everyone was hardened by the harsh land. Monday came, and with it, the start of the school term. Harper rang the bell at 8 o'clock sharp, and children began to arrive, some walking from town, others riding in with parents from outlying ranches. They filed into the schoolroom with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, taking seats on the rough benches. Harper stood before them, her heart pounding. "Good morning," she said. "My name is Miss Grayson, and I am very pleased to be your teacher. We are going to learn many things together this year. Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, and if time permits, some poetry and literature as well." One of the older boys, a lanky youth of about 14, snorted. "Poetry? That is for fancy city folk, not for us." "Poetry is for everyone," Harper said firmly. "It teaches us to see beauty in the world and to express our feelings in elegant ways. Even cowboys might benefit from a little poetry." The children giggled, and the boy subsided, though he looked skeptical. The first day went reasonably well. Harper assessed each student's abilities and found them ranging from complete beginners to a few who could read simple texts. She began to formulate a plan for teaching multiple levels simultaneously, which would be challenging but not impossible. During the lunch break, the children ate outside and Harper sat at her desk, nibbling on the bread and cheese she had prepared that morning. Through the window, she could see several cowboys riding past, their horses kicking up dust. They looked exactly as she had expected. Rough men with hard faces, guns on their hips, concerned only with their work and their wages. Her aunt had been right about them. Over the next 2 weeks, Harper fell into a routine. She taught during the day, prepared lessons in the evening and on weekends. She explored the town cautiously, always keeping to the more respectable areas. She avoided the saloons and the rowdy cowboys who frequented them. She attended church and slowly began to make a few acquaintances among the women of the town. But she still felt lonely and isolated. The other women were kind enough, but they were all busy with their own families and concerns. Harper had no family here, no close friends, and her evenings were spent alone in her small room, reading by lamplight or writing letters home that made everything sound more pleasant than it was. She did not write about how much she missed Philadelphia, about how she still sometimes woke from nightmares of the robbery, about how she felt like an outsider in this rough land. Instead, she wrote about her students and their progress, about the beautiful mountains visible from her window, about the interesting history of the Spanish settlements in the area. She made it sound like an adventure rather than an exile. September arrived, bringing slightly cooler temperatures and the promise of autumn. Harper had been in Abiquiu for a month, and while she had grown more comfortable with the routine of teaching, she still felt disconnected from the community. The cowboys who drifted through town still seemed like dangerous strangers, men who lived by violence and had no appreciation for the finer things in life. Then she met Phillip Nash. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Harper had decided to walk to the edge of town where a small creek ran through a cottonwood grove. It was one of the few pleasant spots she had found, a place where she could sit in the shade and read without interruption. She had brought a book of romantic poetry, her favorite volume, worn from years of reading. She settled on a flat rock near the water, her skirts arranged carefully and open to a well-loved page. She was so absorbed in Keats that she did not hear the approaching footsteps until a voice spoke. "That is a fine choice for an afternoon read." Harper startled, nearly dropping the book into the creek. She looked up to see a man standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar. His eyes were a startling blue-green like the sky just after dawn. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, dusty trousers, a worn shirt, a neckerchief, and boots that had seen hard use. A gun belt sat on his hips, but his hands were nowhere near the weapon. "I apologize for startling you," he said. "I saw you sitting here and recognized the book. I have the same edition." Harper stared at him in disbelief. A cowboy who read Keats. It seemed impossible. "You read poetry." The words came out more skeptical than she intended. His smile was gentle, not offended by her tone. "I do. My mother was a teacher back in Virginia. She made sure I knew my letters and appreciated good writing before she passed. I am Phillip Nash. I work at the Triple Bar Ranch about 5 miles north of here." "Harper Grayson," she said automatically. "I am the new schoolteacher." "Yes, I know. Everyone in town has been talking about the pretty young teacher from Philadelphia." He said it matter-of-factly, without the leering undertone she had come to expect from men in this territory. Harper felt herself blushing. "I do not think pretty has much to do with teaching ability. True enough. But people talk about what interests them, and a new face always interests people." He gestured to a nearby rock. "May I sit? Or would you prefer to be left alone with your reading?" She should have said yes. She should have sent him away. Proper young ladies did not spend time alone with strange men, especially not cowboys who were probably just like all the others beneath a thin veneer of culture. But something in his eyes, a genuine warmth and intelligence, made her hesitate. "You may sit," she said finally, "but only if you can tell me what you think of Keats." Phillip sat down, a good distance away so as not to make her uncomfortable. He looked out at the creek for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Keats understood beauty and mortality better than most. He knew he was going to die young, and that knowledge infused his work with a kind of desperate joy. When he writes about autumn or a nightingale or a Grecian urn, he is really writing about the fleeting nature of all beautiful things. "It makes me appreciate what I have more, knowing it will not last forever." Harper felt her mouth fall open slightly. That was exactly right, exactly how she felt about Keats's work. She had never heard anyone articulate it so well, let alone a cowboy sitting by a creek in New Mexico territory. "You surprise me," she admitted, "because I am a cowboy." His tone was amused rather than bitter. "We are not all rough and heartless, Miss Grayson. Some of us have inner lives." "I did not mean to suggest," Harper began, but he waved off her apology. "Yes, you did, and that is all right. I know what people think of cowboys. Most of the men I work with live up to the reputation too. They drink too much, fight too much, and never crack a book from one year to the next. But that does not mean we are all the same." "What made you different?" Harper asked, curious despite herself. Phillip was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow over the rocks. "My mother, like I said. She died when I was 12, and I promised her I would not let the world make me hard, that I would remember beauty and kindness even when surrounded by hardship. It has not always been easy, but I try to keep that promise." There was such sincerity in his voice that Harper felt her preconceptions beginning to crack. "I am sorry about your mother. Thank you. It was a long time ago, but I still miss her." He turned his attention back to Harper. "What brought you out west? Philadelphia is a long way from here." Harper hesitated. She had told the simple story many times, a desire for adventure, a need to help children in frontier communities. But something about Phillip's openness made her want to be more honest. "I wanted to matter," she said finally. "In Philadelphia, I was just another young woman from a respectable family, expected to make a good marriage and run a household. But I wanted to do something important, something that would make a difference. Teaching here, where children have so few opportunities, seemed like a way to do that." "And has it been what you hoped?" Phillip asked. Harper thought about the robbery, the blood on her dress, the nightmares. She thought about the rough men she saw every day, the violence that seemed to lurk just beneath the surface of frontier life. But she also thought about her students' eager faces, about the way little Sarah Chen's eyes lit up when she mastered a difficult passage, about Alina Martinez thanking her for giving her children a chance at a better future. "It has been harder than I expected," she said carefully, "but also more rewarding. The children are wonderful, it is everything else that is difficult. The violence," Phillip said quietly. "You were on the coach that was robbed, were you not? How did you know? Small town. Word gets around. That must have been terrifying." It was. Harper found herself telling him about the robbery, about watching the guard die, about the cold indifference in the bandit's eyes. She had not talked about it with anyone, not really, but the words poured out now. Phillip listened without interrupting, his expression grave. "I am sorry you had to see that," he said when she finished. "The West is still a violent place, I will not lie about that, but it is getting better slowly. Men like those bandits, they are the last gasps of lawlessness. Eventually, civilization will win out." "You really believe that?" Harper asked. "I have to," Phillip said. "Otherwise, what is the point of trying to be better? What is the point of reading poetry or treating people with kindness if we are all just going to descend into barbarism?" Harper found herself smiling for the first time in what felt like weeks. "You are not what I expected a cowboy to be like." "I will take that as a compliment," Phillip said, smiling back. "Would you mind if I visited you here again? I come into town most Saturdays to pick up supplies. It would be nice to have someone to talk to about books. The other ranch hands think I am strange for reading." Harper knew she should say no. A proper young woman did not encourage the attention of a man she barely knew, especially not without a chaperone. But she heard herself saying, "I would not mind that at all." They talked for another hour that afternoon, about books and poetry, about the differences between the East and the West, about the challenges of frontier life. Phillip was thoughtful and articulate, with a dry sense of humor that made Harper laugh more than she had since arriving in Abiquiu. When he finally stood to leave, touching his hat respectfully, Harper felt a strange reluctance to see him go. "Until next week, Miss Grayson," he said. "Until next week, Mr. Nash," she replied. She watched him walk back toward town, leading his horse, and felt something shift inside her. Maybe not all cowboys were rough and heartless. Maybe she had been too quick to judge. The week passed slowly. Harper threw herself into teaching, introducing her students to basic poetry and being pleased when several of them actually seemed to enjoy it. She found herself thinking about Phillip Nash more than she should, remembering the intelligence in his eyes and the gentle way he spoke about beauty and mortality. Saturday came finally, and Harper found herself walking to the cottonwood grove with her book of poetry, her heart beating faster than it should. What if he did not come? What if he had just been being polite? What if she had misunderstood everything? But he was there, sitting on the same rock, reading his own book. He looked up when he heard her approach and smiled. "Miss Grayson, I was hoping you would come." "I said I would," Harper replied, sitting on her rock. "What are you reading?" He held up the book so she could see the spine. "Whitman, Leaves of Grass. Have you read it, some of it?" "My professors at college thought it was too scandalous for young ladies," Harper admitted, "but I borrowed a copy from a friend and read it anyway." Phillip laughed, a warm, rich sound. "Of course you did. You do not seem like the type to let others dictate what you should read." "Is that how I seem?" Harper asked, pleased. "You came all the way to New Mexico territory to teach children on the frontier. That suggests a certain independence of spirit." They fell into conversation easily, as if they had known each other for years rather than a week. Phillip recited some of his favorite passages from Whitman, his deep voice giving the words a resonance that made Harper's skin prickle with awareness. When it was her turn, she recited Keats from memory, closing her eyes so she could focus on the words. "That was beautiful," Phillip said softly when she finished. "You have a gift for that." I have always loved poetry, Harper said. My friends in Philadelphia thought it was silly, but I never cared. There is something about the way good poetry captures feeling that nothing else can match. I agree. Sometimes, after a long day working cattle, I sit by the bunkhouse and read poetry by lamplight. The other men think I am crazy, but it is the only thing that keeps me sane sometimes. What is it like, working on a ranch? Harper asked. She realized she knew almost nothing about the daily life of a cowboy beyond the rough stereotypes. Phillip began to describe his work. The early mornings, the long days in the saddle, the challenge of managing herds across vast distances, the satisfaction of doing hard physical labor well. He talked about the beauty of the landscape, the way sunrise looked over the mesas, the sound of cattle settling down for the night. He made it sound almost poetic. It is hard work, he said, and sometimes dangerous, but there is a freedom to it that I appreciate. I am not tied to a desk or a factory. Every day is different. Do you ever want something else? Harper asked. Phillip considered the question carefully. Sometimes. I would like to have my own land eventually, a small ranch where I could raise horses. I have always loved horses more than cattle. They are smarter, more responsive, but that takes capital I do not have yet, so for now I work for someone else and save what I can. That seems like a good plan, Harper said. Having goals is important. What about you? Do you plan to stay in Abiquiu forever, or is this just a temporary adventure? Harper had not really thought that far ahead. I have a 2-year contract with the town. After that, I suppose it depends on whether I feel I am making a difference, and whether I can stand being so far from everything familiar for much longer. You miss Philadelphia very much. Yes and no, Harper said honestly. I miss my family and my friends. I miss bookstores and museums and concerts, but I do not miss the expectations and the limitations. Here I can be useful. I can matter. In Philadelphia, I would just be waiting to become someone's wife. You say that as if it would be a prison, Phillip observed. For me, it would be. I do not want my entire identity to be defined by who I marry. I want to have my own purpose, my own achievements. Harper paused, worried she had revealed too much. Most men found such talk off-putting, but Phillip just nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Though I imagine the right man would want you to have your own purpose too. Real love should make both people better, not confine them. Harper stared at him. You have very progressive views for a cowboy, Phillip laughed. My mother again. She was quite ahead of her time. She believed women should have the same opportunities as men, and she made sure I understood that women were not property or ornaments but full human beings with their own dreams and needs. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. You would have liked her, I think. And she would have liked you. They talked until the shadows grew long and Harper realized she needed to get back before dark. Phillip walked her to the edge of town, keeping a respectful distance but close enough that she felt protected. When they parted, he touched his hat again and said, "Same time next week." "Yes," Harper said, not even trying to hide her pleasure. "I would like that." As September turned into October, the Saturday meetings by the creek became the highlight of Harper's week. She and Phillip would sit on their respective rocks and talk for hours, sharing favorite passages from books, debating the merits of different poets, and gradually revealing more about themselves. Harper learned that Phillip was 25 years old, had been working as a cowboy since he was 15, and had left Virginia after his father died. He had no other family, no siblings or close relatives. He had drifted west looking for work and had found his way to New Mexico territory 5 years ago. "Do you ever get lonely?" Harper asked one afternoon. "Not having family?" "Yes," Phillip admitted. especially around holidays or when something important happens and there is no one to share it with. But I have learned to find family in other places. Good friends, people I trust. It is not the same as blood relations, but it is something. Harper understood that feeling all too well. She was lonely here, despite her work and her students. The other women in town were kind but distant, and she had no real friends yet. Except for Phillip, she realized. He had become her friend, perhaps her only real friend in Abiquiu. The Saturday after that realization, Phillip brought his guitar. "I thought you might like to hear some music," he explained. "I am not very good, but I know a few songs." He played and sang, his voice rough but true, folk songs and ballads that told stories of love and loss and adventure. Harper listened, enchanted. When he sang a sad song about a man leaving his sweetheart to go west, she felt tears prick her eyes. "That was beautiful," she said when he finished. "Would you like to learn?" Phillip asked. "It is not hard, just a few chords." Harper hesitated. "I do not know. I have never been very musical." "Neither was I until my mother made me learn. Come here, I will show you." He held out the guitar, and Harper moved from her rock to sit beside him for the first time. He positioned the guitar in her lap, then reached around her to guide her fingers to the strings. His touch was gentle and impersonal, focused on teaching, but Harper was intensely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his body behind hers, the scent of sun and leather and something uniquely him. "Now press down here," he said, guiding her fingers, "and strum with your other hand." She did, producing a sound that was more discord than music. They both laughed. "That was terrible," Harper said. "Everyone starts somewhere. Try again." They spent the next hour on a basic lesson, with Harper slowly improving until she could produce something almost resembling a chord. Phillip was patient and encouraging, never making her feel foolish for her mistakes. When they finally stopped, Harper's fingers were sore, but she felt accomplished. "Thank you," she said. "That was fun." "You are a natural," Phillip said, though they both knew she was not. "With practice, you could be quite good." As Harper walked back to town that evening, she realized something had shifted between them. They had crossed some invisible line from friendly acquaintances to something more. She should have felt worried about that, should have been concerned about propriety and reputation. But instead, she just felt happy. The other people in town had begun to notice their Saturday meetings. Martha Reeves mentioned it after church one Sunday. "I hear you have been spending time with Phillip Nash," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "We meet on Saturdays to discuss books," Harper said, trying to sound casual. "He is very well read." "He is a good man," Martha said. "A bit of a loner, keeps to himself mostly, but always polite and respectful. His boss at the Triple Bar speaks highly of him." She paused. "Just be careful, dear. A young woman's reputation is a fragile thing, even out here." Harper knew Martha meant well, but the warning chafed. "We are just friends," she said. "Of course," Martha replied, but her expression suggested she did not quite believe it. Were they just friends? Harper asked herself that question often as October progressed and the cottonwoods turned gold. She looked forward to Saturdays with an eagerness that went beyond friendship. She thought about Phillip during the week, wondered what he was doing, imagined their conversations. When she read poetry, she heard it in his voice, but she was afraid to examine those feelings too closely. She had come west to be independent, to make her own way. Getting involved with a cowboy, falling in love out here, that was not part of the plan. And yet, she could not seem to help herself. The first Saturday in November was cold, with a sharp wind blowing down from the mountains. Harper bundled in her warmest shawl and made her way to the grove, wondering if Phillip would come in such weather. But he was there, wearing a heavy coat and looking chilled. "We could go somewhere warmer," he suggested. "There is a little cafe in town that makes decent coffee." But then everyone would see us together, Harper said. Would that be so terrible? Phillip asked quietly. Harper, we have been meeting for 2 months now. I think people already know we spend time together. I know, but meeting in public, that would make it seem like we are courting. The word hung in the air between them. Would that be inaccurate? Phillip asked. His blue-green eyes were serious, searching her face. Harper, I need to be honest with you. I have developed feelings beyond friendship. I think about you all the time. You are the first thing on my mind when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I sleep. If you do not feel the same way, tell me now and I will step back. But if you do... Harper's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. I do, she whispered. Feel the same way. I did not want to. I came here to be independent, to focus on my work, but I cannot help it. You are not what I expected, Phillip. You are nothing like what I thought cowboys would be. Phillip smiled, that gentle smile that made her stomach flutter. Thank goodness for that. Can we agree then that we are courting, that this is more than just friendship? Yes, Harper said, feeling both terrified and elated. But Phillip, I do not know what that means for my future. My contract is for 2 years after that. After that we will figure it out, Phillip said. I am not asking you to give up your dreams or your independence. I just want the chance to be part of your life, however that works. They did go to the cafe that day, sitting together at a small table by the window while townspeople glanced at them and whispered. Harper felt exposed and vulnerable, but also strangely free. She did not have to hide anymore. Over coffee, they talked about what courting would mean. They agreed to be open about their relationship, to spend time together in town as well as by the creek, to get to know each other in the context of normal life. Phillip asked if he could take her to dinner sometimes, and Harper agreed. They held hands across the table, and Harper felt the warmth of his touch all the way through her body. As they walked back toward the schoolhouse later, Phillip said, "There is a dance next weekend. The town puts one on the first Saturday of each month through the winter. Would you do me the honor of attending with me?" "I would love to," Harper said. That week dragged by slowly. Harper taught her students, prepared her lessons, and thought constantly about the upcoming dance. She had not been dancing in months, not since she left Philadelphia. She worried about her dress, whether she had anything nice enough. In the end, she chose her best gown, a deep blue silk that brought out her eyes, and spent an hour arranging her hair. When Phillip arrived to collect her, wearing clean trousers and a pressed shirt, his hair still damp from washing, he stared at her for a long moment. "You look beautiful," he said finally. "Thank you. You look very handsome." The dance was held in the largest building in town, a hall that served multiple purposes. It was crowded with people from Abiquiu and the surrounding ranches, all dressed in their best and ready to enjoy themselves. A small band played fiddles and guitars, and the dance floor was already full of couples spinning and laughing. Phillip led Harper onto the floor, and they joined a reel. Harper had learned formal dances in Philadelphia, but this was different, more energetic and less structured. Phillip guided her through the steps, his hand warm on her waist, and Harper found herself laughing breathlessly as they spun. Between dances, Phillip introduced her to some of the other ranch hands from the Triple Bar. They were rougher men than Phillip, but they were polite to Harper and clearly respected their colleague. "Nash here is the best horseman on the ranch," one of them said. "Boss says he has got a gift with them." "He has never mentioned that," Harper said, glancing at Phillip. Phillip shrugged modestly. "I just pay attention to what horses are trying to communicate. Most people do not listen to them." As the evening wore on, Harper found herself relaxing and enjoying the dance more than she had enjoyed anything in a long time. She danced with Phillip mostly, but also with a few other men when Phillip gallantly let them cut in. Everyone seemed pleased to see the schoolteacher enjoying herself, and several women complimented her dress and told her how glad they were that she had come to Abiquiu. During a slower dance, Phillip held her close, and Harper rested her head briefly against his shoulder. "Thank you for bringing me," she whispered. "I did not realize how much I needed this." "Thank you for coming with me," Phillip replied. "You have made me happier than I have been in a very long time, Harper." When Phillip walked her home that night, they paused at her door. The moon was bright, casting silver light over the dusty street. Phillip took both her hands in his. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. Harper's heart stuttered. "Yes." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to change her mind, and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise. When he pulled back, Harper felt dizzy. "Good night, Harper," he said. "Good night, Phillip." She went inside and leaned against the closed door, her fingers touching her lips. She was falling in love with a cowboy. She never would have believed it possible 2 months ago. But Phillip Nash was not like other cowboys. He was gentle and thoughtful, well-read and kind. He recited poetry and played guitar and listened when she talked. He was everything she had not known she wanted. As winter set in, Harper and Phillip's relationship deepened. He came into town every Saturday without fail, and they spent their afternoons together, sometimes at the Grove when weather permitted, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes just walking through town talking. On particularly cold days, Phillip would sit in her schoolroom while she graded papers, reading quietly in the corner. One cold December afternoon, Phillip built a fire in her small stove, and they sat together drinking hot tea while snow fell outside the window. Harper was grading arithmetic assignments when Phillip said, "Would you like me to read to you, please?" Harper said, not looking up from her work. Phillip pulled a small volume from his pocket and began to read. Harper recognized the poem, one of her favorites, Byron's "She Walks in Beauty." His deep voice gave the words new meaning, and when he reached the lines about a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent, Harper looked up and found him watching her. "That is how I think of you," Phillip said quietly. "Pure of heart, beautiful inside and out." "Phillip," Harper whispered, touched beyond words. He set the book aside and moved to kneel beside her chair. "Harper, I love you. I know it is too soon to say it, that we have only been courting for a few weeks. But it is true. You have changed everything for me. Before I met you, I was just drifting, going through the motions of living. Now I feel like I have a purpose beyond just surviving day to day." Tears welled in Harper's eyes. "I love you too," she said. "I tried not to. I thought cowboys were all rough and heartless, but you showed me I was wrong. You are the gentlest, kindest man I have ever known. You read poetry by the fire and changed my mind about everything." Phillip stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping her in his arms. They kissed, longer and deeper than before, and Harper felt like she was coming home. This was what she had been missing all her life, this connection, this understanding, this love. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Phillip said, "I want to marry you, Harper. Not right away. I know you have your teaching contract and your responsibilities. But eventually. I want to build a life with you. I want to buy that land I told you about and start my horse ranch, and I want you beside me. I want children with you, a family. Is that something you might want too?" Harper thought about all the reasons she should say no. She had come west for independence, not marriage. She barely knew this man, had only been courting him for a few weeks. It was too fast, too impulsive. But when she looked into his eyes and saw the love and hope there, all those sensible objections faded away. "Yes," she said. "That is exactly what I want." They held each other while the snow fell outside and the fire crackled in the stove. Harper had never felt so certain of anything in her life. This was right. Phillip was right. "We should wait until the end of your contract to marry," Phillip said practically. That gives us over a year to court properly, to save money, to make plans. I want to be able to offer you more than a bunkhouse and a cowboy's wages. I do not care about money, Harper said, but I agree we should wait, not because of money, but because we should be sure. A year will give us time to truly know each other. I am already sure, Phillip said, but I understand. We will wait. Christmas came, and Harper spent it with Martha and the minister, along with several other townspeople who had no family nearby. It was a simple celebration, nothing like the elaborate holidays she remembered from Philadelphia, but it was warm and genuine. Phillip gave her a book of poetry, a beautiful leather-bound edition of Coleridge that he had ordered from Santa Fe. I thought you might enjoy having a new poet to discuss, he said when she unwrapped it. Harper gave him a knitted scarf she had made, working on it secretly in the evenings. To keep you warm when you are riding, she said. I will treasure it, Phillip promised. In January, a cold snap hit the territory hard, bringing blizzards and temperatures that plunged below zero. School was canceled for a week because it was too dangerous for the children to travel. Harper stayed in her small room, keeping the fire going and reading to pass the time. She worried about Phillip out at the ranch, hoping he was safe and warm. When the weather finally broke, Phillip came into town as soon as he could. His face was wind-burned and he looked exhausted, but he smiled when he saw Harper. I was so worried, Harper said, pulling him inside her schoolroom. Was it terrible, bad enough? We lost some cattle to the cold, and there were a few tense moments when some of the boys got caught out in a blizzard, but everyone made it through all right. He sat down heavily in a chair. I am just glad to see you. I hated being stuck out there not knowing if you were safe. I was fine. Bored, but fine. Harper made him hot coffee and sat beside him. Tell me about what happened. Phillip described the blizzard, the whiteout conditions, the desperate effort to keep the cattle together and protected. He talked about the cold that went bone deep, about frostbite and exhaustion, and the constant fear that someone would get lost in the snow. It sounded terrifying. Does it make you want to do something else? Harper asked. Something less dangerous. Sometimes, Phillip admitted. That is why I want my own place eventually. Not a huge ranch with thousands of head of cattle, but something smaller and more manageable. Horses are my passion anyway. I would be happy with a small operation breeding and training good horses. That sounds wonderful, Harper said. I can imagine it. A ranch with good grazing land, a sturdy house, a barn for the horses, maybe some chickens and a garden. It sounds like a good life. Would you be happy with that kind of life? Phillip asked. It would be hard work and isolated, not like Philadelphia at all. Harper thought about it seriously. I think I would, especially if we had children who needed teaching. I could run a small school right from our home, teach our own children and maybe a few from neighboring ranches. I would still be doing something important, still making a difference. That sounds perfect, Phillip said. You have thought about this. I have thought about very little else since you proposed, Harper admitted. I want to make sure I can be happy with that life, that I am not giving up too much of myself, but the more I think about it, the more right it feels. I love teaching, but I love you more. And I can teach anywhere. I do not need a formal schoolhouse to make a difference. Phillip kissed her then, a long, tender kiss that sealed the promise they were making to each other. They would build a life together, different from what either of them had imagined, but theirs. Winter slowly gave way to spring. The days grew longer and warmer, and the desert came alive with wildflowers. Harper's students progressed beautifully, many of them advancing several grade levels. She was proud of their achievements and grateful for the trust their parents had placed in her. On a warm April Saturday, Phillip took Harper riding for the first time. He had borrowed a gentle mare from the ranch, and he patiently taught Harper the basics of horsemanship. She was nervous at first, but Philip's calm presence and clear instruction helped her relax. They rode out into the desert, away from town, until they reached a high point with a spectacular view of the surrounding landscape. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and blue in the afternoon light. The sky stretched endlessly above them, so vast and open that Harper felt tiny beneath it. "This is what I love about this land," Philip said as they sat on their horses side by side. "This sense of space and possibility. It is so different from the crowded cities back east. Here you can breathe." "I am beginning to understand that," Harper said. "When I first came here, I thought it was empty and harsh, but now I see the beauty in it. It is a different kind of beauty than what I was used to, but it is real." "You have changed," Philip observed, "since I first met you. You seem more settled, more at peace." "I feel that way," Harper said. "I think I finally understand why I came here. It was not just about teaching or independence. It was about finding where I belong, and I belong here with you." Philip reached over and took her hand, their horses standing patiently. "I feel the same way. I was just drifting before you. Now I have an anchor." As summer approached and the end of the school year loomed, Harper had to make decisions about her future. The town wanted her to continue teaching, and she wanted to continue, but she also wanted to marry Philip. They discussed it at length, trying to figure out the best path forward. "What if we got married this summer?" Philip suggested, "and you continued teaching for another year? We could find a small house in town to rent. It would not be ideal, but it would let you fulfill your contract. Then after that, we could move to our own place." "That might work," Harper said slowly, "but could you keep working at the Triple Bar if you lived in town?" "It would be harder, but I could manage. Some of the men commute from town. It would mean longer days for me, but it would be worth it to wake up next to you every morning." They decided to present the plan to the town council and to Philip's boss at the Triple Bar. To their relief, both parties were agreeable. The town was delighted that Harper would continue teaching, and Philip's boss, while not thrilled about the arrangement, agreed to accommodate it because Philip was such a valuable worker. "There is one condition," the boss said. "I need a commitment from you, Nash. If you are going to keep working here, I need to know you are not going to up and leave in a few months to start your own operation." "I give you my word," Philip said. "I will stay on for at least 2 more years, probably 3. I need time to save the capital to buy land and stock anyway." With that settled, Harper and Philip set a wedding date for the end of July, after the school year finished. Harper wrote letters to her family in Philadelphia, knowing they would be shocked but hoping they would understand. Her mother wrote back expressing concern about Harper marrying a cowboy she barely knew, but also a grudging acceptance that Harper seemed to have made up her mind. Martha Reeves threw herself into helping plan the wedding with enthusiasm that touched Harper deeply. "You deserve to be happy, dear," she said. "And Philip is a good man. I am so pleased for both of you." The wedding preparations became a community effort. Elena Martinez and several other mothers sewed Harper a beautiful dress of cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Mr. Chen provided rice and paper flowers for decorations. The church was cleaned and decorated with wildflowers. Everyone seemed genuinely happy for the couple. On the last day of school in June, Harper's students presented her with a handmade book filled with their drawings and messages of thanks. Sarah Chen had written a poem about learning to read, and it was so sweet that Harper cried when she read it aloud. "You have taught us so much, Miss Grayson," Sarah said. "We are all so happy that you are staying and not going back to Philadelphia." "I am staying," Harper confirmed. "This is my home now, and I am so proud of all of you. You have worked so hard and learned so much. Keep reading and studying, and you will all do wonderful things." The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Harper and Phillip found a small house to rent on the edge of town, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it had a nice porch and a view of the mountains. They spent their Saturdays fixing it up, whitewashing the walls and repairing the shutters. Harper hung curtains she had sewn and arranged their few pieces of furniture. "It is not much," Phillip said, looking around the small space, "but it is ours." "It is perfect," Harper said. "All I need is you." The night before the wedding, Harper could not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed in the schoolhouse for the last time, thinking about how much her life had changed in the past year. She had arrived in Abiquiu frightened and alone, convinced that the West was harsh and that cowboys were rough and heartless. Now she was about to marry one, and she had never been happier. The wedding took place on a beautiful July afternoon, the church filled with townspeople and everyone from the Triple Bar Ranch who could get away. Harper wore her cream silk dress and carried wildflowers. Phillip stood at the altar in a new suit, his eyes shining as he watched her walk down the aisle. The ceremony was simple but moving. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love and honor each other for as long as they both lived. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Phillip kissed Harper tenderly, and the congregation erupted in applause. The reception was held outside, with tables of food that people had contributed and music provided by the local band. Harper and Phillip danced their first dance as husband and wife while everyone watched and cheered. Harper felt like she was floating, like this could not possibly be real. "Happy," Phillip murmured in her ear as they swayed to the music. "Beyond measure," Harper replied. "You." "I never thought I could be this happy," Phillip said. "You are everything to me, Harper, my wife. I love you." "I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes." They danced until the sun set and the stars came out. People gradually drifted away, heading home until only a few close friends remained. Finally, Phillip took Harper's hand and said, "Shall we go home, Mrs. Nash?" "Yes," Harper said, loving the sound of her new name. "Let us go home." Their first night together in their little house was everything Harper had hoped for, tender and sweet, and a little awkward as they learned each other. Phillip was patient and gentle, always checking to make sure she was comfortable. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the night through the open window. "I cannot believe you are really mine," Phillip whispered. "I keep thinking I will wake up and find out this was all a dream." "It is real," Harper assured him. "I am yours and you are mine for the rest of our lives." The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Harper had never lived with anyone other than her family before, and suddenly she was sharing her space with a husband. They had to learn each other's habits and preferences, how to navigate disagreements, how to balance their individual needs with their needs as a couple. But it was also wonderful. Harper loved waking up next to Phillip every morning, loved preparing meals together, loved sitting on their porch in the evenings and talking about their days. Phillip would read poetry to her while she mended clothes, his deep voice filling the small house with beauty. When school started again in September, Harper threw herself into teaching with renewed energy. She now had 14 students, including a few new ones whose families had recently moved to the area. She expanded the curriculum, adding more literature and history, and was pleased to see her students thriving. Phillip continued to work at the Triple Bar, leaving before dawn and returning after dark. The long days were hard on both of them, but they made the most of their time together. On Sundays, their only full day together, they would often ride out into the desert, just the two of them and the endless sky. In November, Harper realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not wanted to say anything until she was sure. When she told Philip, he was overjoyed. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Harper, this is incredible." "Are you happy?" Harper asked, though she could see he was. Happy does not begin to cover it. Terrified, thrilled, grateful, all of those things. He put his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one. We cannot wait to meet you." Harper continued teaching through the winter, though she grew increasingly tired and uncomfortable as her pregnancy progressed. The women of the town rallied around her, giving her advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Martha knitted tiny sweaters and booties. Alina made a beautiful quilt for the baby's cradle. In March, with only a few months left in her second school year and her pregnancy growing more obvious, Harper decided she would not return to teaching the following year. It was a difficult decision, but she knew that with a new baby and the plan to move to their own land eventually, something had to give. "I will miss teaching," she told Philip one evening, "but I will not miss it more than I would miss being with our child every day. And I can always teach again later once the children are older." "Children?" Philip asked with a smile. "Plural, I hope so. I would like at least 3 or 4 if we are blessed. Then that is what we will have. A house full of children who love books and poetry and horses." "It sounds perfect." Their son was born on a hot day in early June, after a long, difficult labor that left Harper exhausted but triumphant. Philip stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement, refusing to leave even when Martha tried to shoo him out. When the midwife finally placed the baby in Harper's arms, she and Philip stared at him in wonder. He was tiny and red and absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same blue-green as his father's. "What should we name him?" Harper asked. They had discussed names for months without deciding. Now, looking at their son, Philip said, "What about James? After my mother's father, he was a good man, a teacher like you." "James Nash," Harper said, trying it out. "I love it. James Phillip Nash." "Perfect," Philip agreed. The summer after James was born was both exhausting and beautiful. Harper learned how to care for an infant while Philip learned how to help while still working his demanding job. They were both tired all the time, but they were also deliriously happy. In August, Philip came home with exciting news. "I have been talking to some of the other ranch hands," he said. "There is a piece of land about 10 miles north of here, good grazing and a water source that the owner is looking to sell. It is not huge, only about 200 acres, but it would be perfect for starting a horse operation, and the price is reasonable, at least by my standards." "Can we afford it?" Harper asked. "Not yet. But in another year, maybe 2, we should have saved enough. Especially if I keep getting the bonuses I have been getting for my work with the horses." They began to plan in earnest then, talking late into the night about what their ranch would look like, how many horses they would start with, what kind of house they would build. Harper drew sketches while Philip made lists of equipment they would need and costs they would have to cover. "I want to make sure we have a good house before we move out there," Philip said. "Something sturdy and comfortable with real windows and a good roof. I do not want you and James living in some rough cabin." "I would live in a tent with you if I had to," Harper said, "but I appreciate the consideration." As James grew from an infant into a toddler, Harper found herself falling more in love with both her son and her husband. Philip was a wonderful father, patient and playful, always finding time to spend with James no matter how tired he was from work. He would lie on the floor and let James climb on him, or carry the boy on his shoulders around their small yard, or read to him from children's books in that deep, gentle voice. One evening when James was about 18 months old, Harper found Philip sitting on the porch with the boy in his lap, reciting poetry. Not children's poems, but real poetry, the same Keats and Byron and Coleridge that he had once read to Harper. "He is too young to understand that," Harper said, coming to sit beside them. "Maybe," Phillip said, "but he likes the sound of it, and maybe it will sink in somehow, help him appreciate beautiful language when he is older." Harper leaned her head on Phillip's shoulder, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I love our life," she said quietly. "I never imagined I could be this content." "Neither did I," Phillip said. "You saved me, Harper. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions. You gave me a reason to want more, to be more." "You changed me too," Harper said. "I thought I knew what I wanted when I came here. Independence, purpose, making a difference. But what I really wanted was love and family and belonging. You gave me all of that. You and James." In the spring of 1881, after 3 years of careful saving and planning, Phillip finally had enough money to buy the land he had been eyeing. The sale went through without complications, and suddenly they owned 200 acres of New Mexico territory. "We need to give it a name," Harper said as they rode out to look at their property together, leaving James with Martha for the afternoon. "All proper ranches have names." "What about the Poetry Ranch?" Phillip suggested with a grin. "Since that is how we met," Harper laughed. "The other ranchers would think we were crazy." "What about the Nash Ranch? Simple and straightforward." "Too boring." "How about Cottonwood Ranch after the grove where we had our first real conversation?" "I like that," Harper said. "The Cottonwood Ranch, it has a nice sound to it." They spent the next few months preparing to move. Phillip and several men from the Triple Bar built a sturdy 3-room house with a proper kitchen and a loft where children could sleep. They dug a well and built a barn and fenced pastures. Phillip bought 3 mares, carefully selected for their bloodlines and temperament, the foundation of his breeding program. Harper packed up their possessions and said goodbye to their little house in town. She felt a pang of sadness leaving the place where she and Phillip had started their marriage, where James had been born. But she was excited about their new life on the ranch. They moved in late summer, loading a wagon with their furniture and supplies and making the journey to their new home. When Harper saw the house for the first time, finished and waiting for them, she felt tears spring to her eyes. It was not fancy, but it was solid and well built, with real glass windows and a stone chimney. It looked like a home. "What do you think?" Phillip asked anxiously. "It is perfect," Harper said. "Absolutely perfect." They settled into ranch life quickly. Phillip worked with his horses from dawn to dusk, gentling and training them with the patience and skill that had made him valuable at the Triple Bar. Harper set up their home, planted a garden, and took care of James. It was hard work, but satisfying in a way that nothing else had ever been. In the evenings, after James was asleep, Harper and Phillip would sit on their porch and watch the stars come out. Sometimes Phillip would play his guitar and sing. Sometimes they would just talk, sharing the events of their day. And sometimes Phillip would recite poetry, his voice carrying across the quiet land. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Phillip asked one night. Harper thought about it. "Sometimes I miss the conveniences, bookstores and restaurants and theaters. But I do not miss the life I would have had there. I would have been so constrained, so limited. Here I can be myself. I can be your wife and James's mother and still be Harper, still have my own thoughts and dreams." "You could go back sometime if you wanted," Phillip said. "To visit, I would manage here." "Maybe someday," Harper said. "When the children are older, I would like them to meet my family, to see where I came from, but this is home now. This ranch, this land, this life with you." In the fall of 1881, Harper discovered she was pregnant again. She was thrilled, though also a bit anxious about managing a toddler and an infant while helping run a ranch. But Phillip was supportive and excited, and she knew they would manage somehow. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1882, an easier birth than James had been. She had Harper's dark hair and Philip's blue-green eyes, and they named her Alina after Philip's mother. "She would have loved you," Philip told Harper as they looked down at their sleeping daughter. "My mother. You are everything she hoped I would find someday." Life with two children was chaotic but joyful. James, now a busy 3-year-old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. Harper taught him to be gentle, to bring diapers and blankets, to sing softly to Alina when she cried. The Cottonwood Ranch began to develop a reputation for quality horses. Philip's breeding program was producing strong, intelligent foals that he trained to be responsive and reliable. Ranchers from all over the territory started coming to buy horses from him, and suddenly they had more business than Philip could handle alone. "I am going to need help," Philip told Harper. "Maybe hire a young man who wants to learn the trade, someone with a good work ethic and a feel for horses." They hired a 19-year-old named Tommy, whose family had a small ranch nearby. He proved to be a quick learner and a hard worker, taking over many of the routine tasks and freeing Philip to focus on the training and breeding. As the ranch prospered, Harper and Philip made improvements. They added another room to the house, turned the loft into proper bedrooms for the children, and built a chicken coop and a larger barn. Harper started teaching James his letters and numbers, preparing him for formal schooling eventually. She found that she loved teaching her own child just as much as she had loved teaching in the schoolhouse. In 1884, their third child was born, another son they named William. Harper was 28 now, Philip was 31, and they felt like they had finally achieved everything they had dreamed of. They had their land, their home, their horses, their children. Life was not easy, but it was good. One evening when William was a few months old, Harper was sitting on the porch nursing the baby while James and Alina played in the yard under Philip's watchful eye. The sun was setting, painting the landscape in shades of gold and purple. Philip was showing the children how to whistle using grass blades, and their laughter floated across the yard. Martha Reeves came riding up, a surprise visitor. They had not seen her in several months, as the ranch was too far from town for casual visits. "I hope I am not intruding," she said as she dismounted, "but I wanted to bring you something." She pulled a package from her saddlebag and handed it to Harper. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. "I thought you might like to write down your story," Martha said. "How you came to New Mexico, how you met Philip, how you built this life. It is a remarkable story, Harper, one worth preserving." Harper was touched. "Thank you, Martha, that is very thoughtful." "You were so frightened when you first arrived," Martha continued. "After that awful robbery, I remember thinking you might not last, that you would go running back to Philadelphia at the first opportunity, but you proved me wrong. You found your place here, you found love." After Martha left, Harper opened the journal and stared at the first blank page. She thought about everything that had happened since that terrifying day she stepped off the stagecoach in Abiquiu. How she had been so convinced that cowboys were rough and heartless, that there was no beauty or culture in the West. How wrong she had been. She thought about Philip reading poetry by the creek, his voice gentle and his eyes kind. She thought about how he had changed her mind, not through argument but through example. He had shown her that a man could be strong and gentle, tough and cultured, a cowboy and a poet. She began to write, documenting their story. She wrote about their first meeting, about falling in love, about building a life together. She wrote about the challenges and the joys, the fears and the triumphs. And she wrote about the children, their beautiful children who were growing up knowing that cowboys could recite poetry and that love could transform everything. The years passed. James grew into a serious, studious boy who loved books as much as horses. Eleanor was adventurous and fearless, always wanting to help her father in the barn. William was sweet and gentle, the peacemaker among his siblings. In 1886, Harper gave birth to their fourth child, another daughter they named Catherine. The Cottonwood Ranch continued to prosper. Philip's reputation as a horse trainer spread beyond New Mexico territory, and buyers came from as far as Texas and Arizona to purchase his stock. They were not wealthy by city standards, but they were comfortable and secure in a way that felt like an incredible achievement. Harper continued to teach her children at home, using the skills she had developed in the schoolhouse in Abiquiu. She found creative ways to make lessons engaging, incorporating poetry and literature alongside the practical skills they needed for ranch life. James showed a particular aptitude for mathematics and science, while Eleanor loved history and geography. One day in the summer of 1887, when James was 8 years old, he came to Harper with a question. "Mother, how did you and Father meet? I know you came from Philadelphia, but how did you end up marrying a cowboy?" Harper smiled and pulled out the journal Martha had given her years before. It was nearly full now, documenting almost a decade of their family's life. "It is a good story," she said. "Would you like to hear it?" She told him about arriving in Abiquiu, about the robbery and her fear, about her prejudices against cowboys. She told him about meeting his father by the creek, about how he had recited poetry and changed her mind about everything. James listened, fascinated. "So you thought Father was rough and heartless?" James asked, incredulous. "But he is the kindest person I know." "That is exactly what I learned," Harper said. "Never judge people by your preconceptions. Your father taught me that. He showed me that a cowboy could have a gentle soul and love beautiful things. He showed me that real strength includes kindness." That evening, Harper shared the conversation with Philip as they sat on their porch after the children were in bed. "James wanted to know how we met," she said. "I told him the story." "What did you say?" Philip asked. "The truth. That I thought cowboys were all rough and heartless until you recited poetry by the fire and changed my mind." Philip laughed, that warm, deep laugh that Harper still loved after all these years. "I was not trying to change your mind. I just wanted to talk to someone about books." "And look where it led us," Harper said, gesturing at their ranch, their home, the life they had built. "Everything we have came from that first conversation by the creek." "No," Philip said, taking her hand. "Everything we have came from being open to the possibility that people are more complicated than we think, from being willing to let our prejudices be challenged, from choosing love over fear." Harper squeezed his hand. "You are right, as usual. I am so grateful I took that chance on you, on us." "So am I," Philip said. "So am I." As the sun set over the Cottonwood Ranch, Harper reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Abiquiu, convinced she knew what cowboys were like. She thought about how wrong she had been and how grateful she was for that. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. The children grew. The ranch grew. Harper and Philip grew older together, their love deepening with time rather than fading. James eventually went to college in Santa Fe, studying engineering, but he came back to the ranch every summer and eventually returned permanently, helping his father expand the horse operation. Eleanor married a rancher from a neighboring property, someone as adventurous as she was. William became a teacher, following in his mother's footsteps, but teaching in the new school that had been built in Abiquiu. Catherine, the baby, showed an early talent for art and music. Through it all, Philip never stopped reading poetry. Even as he grew older and his hair turned gray, Even as his hands became gnarled from years of hard work, he would sit on the porch in the evenings and recite verses from memory. Sometimes the children would join them, and Harper would listen to 3 generations of her family sharing words of beauty under the stars. In 1895, on their 17th wedding anniversary, Phillip gave Harper a gift. It was a small book, professionally bound, with their names embossed on the cover. Inside were all the poems he had read to her over the years, carefully copied out in his neat handwriting. "I wanted you to have them all in one place," he explained. "Every poem I have ever shared with you, from that first day by the creek until now, our story in verses." Harper cried as she paged through it, recognizing favorites and discovering some she had forgotten. "This is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me," she said. "Thank you, my love." "Thank you for listening," Phillip said, "for understanding that a cowboy can have a poet's heart, for seeing who I really was beneath the rough exterior." "You were never rough," Harper said. "Not where it mattered. Your soul was always gentle." They kissed, still deeply in love after all these years, and Harper marveled at how blessed she had been. She had come west looking for purpose and independence, and she had found so much more. She had found a partner, a home, a family. She had found a life beyond anything she could have imagined. As the new century approached, Harper began to think about legacy, about what she wanted to leave behind. She continued writing in her journal, now on the 3rd volume, documenting not just her own story but her children's stories and the story of the Cottonwood Ranch. She wanted future generations to know how it all began, with a frightened young teacher and a cowboy who loved poetry. In 1898, Harper turned 42, and Phillip turned 45. Their grandchildren had started to arrive as James married and started his own family. The ranch now employed several men and had a reputation as the finest source of horses in the Southwest. They had achieved everything they had set out to do and more. One evening that fall, Harper and Phillip sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The stars were brilliant overhead and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage. Their children were grown and mostly gone, building their own lives. The house that had once rung with childish laughter was quieter now. "You ever regret it?" Harper asked. "The life we chose?" "We worked so hard, gave up so much." Phillip looked at her, his blue-green eyes still as striking as the day she met him. "Not for one second. Every difficult day, every challenge, every sacrifice, it all led to this. To you and me, still together, still in love, that is worth everything." "I feel the same way," Harper said. "I thought I knew what I wanted when I came here, but what I really wanted was you. I just did not know it until you started reciting poetry by a creek and showed me what a cowboy could really be." "A cowboy with a poet's heart," Phillip said with a smile. "The best kind," Harper agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the stars wheel overhead. The Cottonwood Ranch stretched out around them, everything they had built together, a testament to love and hard work, and refusing to accept other people's narrow definitions. In the distance, a horse whinnied softly. Phillip's ears perked up. "That is Moonlight," he said, referring to one of his prize mares. "She sounds restless. I should check on her." "I will come with you," Harper said. They walked to the barn together, moving slower than they once had but still comfortable in each other's presence. Moonlight was indeed restless, shifting in her stall. Phillip spoke to her softly, running his hands over her sides, and gradually the horse calmed. "She is fine," Phillip said. "Just needed some attention." "You have always had such a gift with horses," Harper said. "They trust you completely." "They know I listen to them," Phillip said. "Same way you know I listen to you. It is about respect and attention and genuine care." Walking back to the house, Harper felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Her life had not turned out anything like she had planned when she was young. It had turned out so much better. The new century arrived with celebrations and optimism. The Cottonwood Ranch continued to thrive into the 1900s. Harper and Phillip grew older together, their hair gray, their bodies slowed by age, but their love as strong as ever. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, their children threw them a celebration. James and his wife came with their 3 children. Eleanor and her husband brought their 2. William came from Abiquiu with his new fiancée. Catherine, now 21 and studying art in Santa Fe, came home for the occasion. The house was filled with family, laughter, and love. A local band played, and Harper and Phillip danced the way they had at their wedding, moving slower but with the same tenderness. As Harper looked around at all the people gathered, all the lives that had come from that chance meeting by a creek so many years ago, she felt overwhelmed with joy. That evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, Harper and Phillip sat on their porch one more time. The stars were as bright as always, the air was sweet, and everything was peaceful. 25 years, Harper said. A quarter of a century. Can you believe it? I can barely remember what my life was like before you, Phillip admitted. You are so woven into every part of me that it is like you have always been there. I feel the same way. When I think about that frightened young woman who arrived in Abiquiu, convinced that cowboys were rough and heartless, she seems like a stranger to me now. She was not a stranger, Phillip said gently. She was you, just earlier in your journey. She had the courage to come west, the courage to take a chance on an unusual cowboy who read poetry. She became the woman sitting here with me now. Harper leaned her head on Phillip's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. Read me something, she said, like you used to. Phillip did not need a book anymore. He knew so many poems by heart. He began to recite, his voice still deep and resonant despite his age, speaking words of love and beauty into the night. Harper closed her eyes and listened, transported back to that first day by the creek when she had been so surprised to hear poetry from a cowboy's lips. That surprise had changed her life, had opened her heart to possibilities she never knew existed. The poem ended and they sat in silence, comfortable and complete. They had built a good life together, a life full of love and purpose and meaning. They had raised children who were good people, who contributed to their communities, who knew that strength and gentleness could coexist. They had created something lasting. I love you, Harper said simply. I have loved you from the moment you started talking about Keats by that creek, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, Phillip replied. You are my greatest adventure, my dearest companion, my truest friend. Everything I am and everything I have is because of you. They kissed, a gentle kiss full of 25 years of shared history, and then sat together watching the stars until the night grew cold and they went inside to their warm bed. The years that followed were quieter. Harper and Phillip gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to James, who had proven to be as skilled with horses as his father. They spent their days in gentle pursuits, raiding, gardening, spending time with their growing number of grandchildren. Harper finally finished her journals, filling 5 volumes with the story of their life together. She gave copies to each of her children, wanting them to have a record of where they came from, of the love that had created their family. In 1910, Harper and Phillip celebrated their 32nd anniversary. They were in their 50s now, considered old by frontier standards but still healthy and active. They had outlived many of their contemporaries and were grateful for every day they had together. One warm June evening, they sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The Cottonwood Ranch spread out around them, prosperous and beautiful, a testament to their vision and hard work. Their children and grandchildren were scattered but close, building their own lives while staying connected to the ranch. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Harper asked. "By the creek, when you saw me reading Keats." "I said it was a fine choice for an afternoon read," Phillip recalled with a smile. "And then you looked at me like I had sprouted a second head because you could not believe a cowboy would know Keats." "You shocked me," Harper admitted. "Everything I thought I knew about cowboys you proved wrong. You were gentle and educated and kind. You read poetry by the fire and changed my mind about everything." "I am glad I could surprise you," Phillip said. "Otherwise, you might never have given me a chance." "I would have been a fool not to," Harper said. "You were worth 1,000 of the supposedly proper gentlemen back in Philadelphia. You had real substance, real character. You still do." Phillip took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "We have had a good life together, haven't we? Despite all the challenges and hardships." "The best life," Harper agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was young. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted: love, partnership, adventure, purpose. You gave me a home." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Around them, the ranch hummed with quiet life. Horses moving in the pastures, chickens settling for the night, the rustle of wind through the cottonwood trees. Harper thought about the journey that had brought her here, from Philadelphia to Abiquiu to the Cottonwood Ranch. She thought about the robbery that had terrified her, the loneliness of her first months in New Mexico, the way she had judged all cowboys as rough and heartless. And she thought about Phillip, the man who had proven her so wonderfully wrong. "Read me one more poem," Harper said. "Something about love." Phillip thought for a moment, then began to recite Elizabeth Barrett Browning, words about loving to the depth and breadth and height that the soul can reach. His voice was still beautiful, still full of warmth and sincerity. Harper listened with her eyes closed, feeling the words wash over her. When he finished, she opened her eyes and looked at him. "That is exactly how I love you," she said. "To the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach." "And I love you the same way," Phillip replied. "You are everything to me, Harper. You always have been." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Harper reflected on how blessed she had been. She had taken a chance on a cowboy who read poetry, and that chance had given her everything. A husband who cherished her, children who thrived, a legacy that would continue long after she was gone. The West had not been what she expected when she first arrived, frightened and judgmental. It had been so much better. It had given her the space to become herself, the freedom to build a life on her own terms, and the love of a man who saw her for who she truly was. Harper and Phillip grew old together on the Cottonwood Ranch, surrounded by family and love. They watched their grandchildren grow and eventually their great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to prosper, a testament to the foundation they had built. They never stopped sitting on their porch in the evenings. They never stopped holding hands. And Phillip never stopped reading poetry to Harper, his voice carrying across the quiet land, filling their hearts with beauty. When Harper was 71 and Phillip was 74, they sat on that porch one last time together. It was a beautiful spring evening, the kind they had both always loved, with wildflowers blooming across the desert and the air soft and sweet. "I want you to know something," Harper said. "If I had to live my life over again, I would not change a single thing. Every choice, every moment, every challenge, it all led me to you, and that makes it all worth it." "I feel exactly the same way," Phillip said. "You have been my greatest blessing, Harper. Loving you has been the privilege of my life." They kissed, gentle and sweet, the way they had kissed thousands of times before. And they sat together holding hands, watching the sunset, grateful for every moment they had been given. Harper Grayson Nash passed away peacefully in her sleep a few weeks later, surrounded by her family. Phillip followed her 6 months after that, his children believing he simply could not bear to be without her. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the Cottonwood Ranch, with matching headstones that read simply, "She thought cowboys were rough and heartless." He recited poetry and changed her mind, together forever. Their children and grandchildren continued to run the ranch for generations, always remembering the love story that had started it all. The journals Harper had kept were preserved and eventually published, telling the story of a Philadelphia schoolteacher and a cowboy poet who proved that love could transcend prejudice and expectation. The Cottonwood Ranch still stands today, though it is now run by Harper and Phillip's great-great-grandchildren. The house has been expanded and modernized, but the original porch where they sat together for so many evenings is preserved exactly as it was. And on warm summer nights, if you listen carefully, some say you can still hear a deep voice reciting poetry into the darkness, and a woman's soft laughter in reply. Their story became a legend in New Mexico, a reminder that people are never just what they seem, that cowboys can have poets' hearts, and that love can flourish in the most unexpected places. It is a story about challenging prejudice, about taking chances, about building something beautiful together despite all the odds. Harper had come west thinking she knew what she would find: rough men, harsh land, and a simple life teaching children. Instead, she found Phillip Nash, a cowboy who read Keats and Whitman, who could gentle a wild horse with patience and speak of beauty and mortality with equal ease. She found a man who was strong enough to work from dawn to dusk, but gentle enough to hold a newborn baby like precious china. She found a partner who valued her intelligence and independence, even as he loved her with his whole heart. And Phillip had found in Harper everything he had been searching for without knowing it. Someone who appreciated the things he loved, who saw past the rough exterior of a working cowboy to the soul beneath, who built a life with him that honored both their dreams. Together, they proved that the best love stories are the ones where both people become more than they could have been alone. Their legacy lived on not just in the ranch they built or the children they raised, but in the lesson they taught. Never judge someone by your preconceptions. Give people a chance to surprise you, and if a cowboy starts reciting poetry by a creek, listen to him. He might just change your life. Harper and Phillip's love story was complete, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But more than that, it was a story with meaning and purpose, showing that real love transcends circumstances and expectations. It was a story of two people who found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together, something that lasted long beyond their own lives. The Cottonwood Ranch remained a working horse ranch, still producing some of the finest horses in the Southwest, just as Phillip had dreamed. The family stayed close, gathering regularly at the ranch for holidays and celebrations, keeping alive the traditions Harper and Phillip had established. The journals Harper had written were read by each new generation, ensuring that no one forgot where they came from or the love that had made it all possible. And so the story that began with a frightened young woman on a stagecoach and a cowboy reading poetry by a creek ended exactly as it should. With a love that lasted a lifetime, a family that thrived for generations, and a legacy that reminded everyone who heard it that the best things in life come from being open to possibilities, challenging our prejudices, and believing that even in the rough frontier of the Old West, beauty and poetry and gentle love could flourish. Harper thought cowboys were all rough and heartless. Phillip Nash recited poetry by the fire and changed her mind. And in doing so, He changed both their lives forever, creating a love story for the ages and a family that would carry their values forward into the future. Their story was complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure. And that was exactly how it should be.